Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, be honest with me. Have you ever been trapped in one of those endless planning meetings for a project that you just knew was doomed from the start? It's the worst, right? Well, today, we're unpacking the mechanics of modern project management to solve exactly that problem. We're looking at a pretty fascinating shift in how work actually gets done, moving away from rigid, traditional plans to highly adaptable frameworks. We're even going to look ahead at how artificial intelligence is completely changing the game entirely. I am super thrilled to guide you through this material because it's incredibly practical, whether you're building complex software or, say, optimizing a massive warehouse. Okay, let's dive into this.
Here is our cognitive roadmap for the explainer, showing exactly how we are going to build from textbook mechanics up to advanced AI strategies. We'll start with the Agile mindset shift, then break down core Scrum roles and artifacts, map out the time-boxed sprint lifecycle, and learn how to craft perfect user stories. After that, we'll look at Scrum in action with a real-world case study before finishing up with the future, AI-enhanced Agile. Let's get started.
Section 1. The Agile Mindset Shift. To understand why Agile is so revolutionary, we first have to recognize a basic truth. Modern business is defined by absolute uncertainty, rapid change, and just immense complexity. You simply cannot predict everything on day one. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is this stark contrast between these two approaches. Traditional project management assumes you can fully define your requirements right out of the gate. It's a very linear path. But because it's so inflexible and actively discourages adjusting to change, it almost always leads to massive delays, rework, and missed targets. The Agile mindset, on the other hand, it's totally rooted in adaptability. Instead of trying to predict and control every little detail months in advance, Agile manages uncertainty through short, continuous cycles. You plan, you execute, you reflect, and you deliver value early. You're constantly gathering iterative feedback and pivoting when new information inevitably surfaces.
Section 2, Core Scrum Roles and Artifacts.
So how do we actually implement this Agile mindset in the real world? Well, the most widely used framework is Scrum. Now, Scrum doesn't tell you exactly how to code a technical solution. Instead, it gives you a really simple, structured way to organize the work itself. But to make Scrum work, you need highly specific roles. And here's the twist. The traditional bossy project manager role, it simply does not exist in pure Scrum. No way. Instead, responsibilities are split. Look at the product owner. They own the what and the why. They care about the scope, the return on investment, prioritizing business value. They are the ultimate authoritative voice for the project's direction. Contrast that with the Scrum Master. The Scrum Master owns the process. They aren't a boss assigning tasks. They're actually a servant leader. Their entire job is to coach the team, safeguard those agile principles, and ruthlessly remove any blockers standing in the team's way. And finally, you have the developers, who own the how, the actual technical execution of the work.
Naturally, all of this work has to live somewhere, right? Which brings us to our first core artifact, the product backlog. This isn't just some casual to-do list. It is the absolute starting point, the single authoritative list of all requirements, features, and prioritized user stories. It's the definitive roadmap. If a feature isn't in the backlog, it doesn't get built, period. Think of it as the project's ruthless bouncer. The product owner meticulously organizes this thing to make sure the most valuable work is always sitting right there at the very top.
Section 3, the time-boxed sprint lifecycle.
Okay, so now that we have a fully prioritized backlog set, we need a cyclical, highly disciplined workflow to actually execute that work efficiently. Let's walk through what a typical 2-week sprint looks like chronologically. On day 1, the team holds sprint planning, where they pull the top items from the product backlog and commit to delivering them. Then, from days 2 through 13, the team enters the sprint. Every single day, they hold a 15-minute daily Scrum meeting. This is just to check progress, plan the day, and surface any immediate problems. Moving on to day 14, the team delivers an increment. This is a usable, thoroughly tested, functional piece of the product. Finally, on day 15, the cycle wraps up with a sprint review and a sprint retrospective, before the whole process starts right back up again.
So the crucial point is this concept of time boxing. Notice how incredibly strict these boundaries are. A sprint is exactly 2 weeks. A daily Scrum is exactly 15 minutes. By allocating a fixed, unyielding limit of time to an activity, Scrum enforces hyper-focus. It's literally the ultimate defense mechanism against that notorious scope creep that ends up dooming so many traditional projects.
Now, I want to clearly differentiate the two final events of the sprint cycle, which are often called the 2 Rs. The sprint review evaluates the product itself. It's an external-facing meeting where you ask, what did we actually build? Are the stakeholders and customers happy with the increment? The sprint retrospective, however, evaluates the process. It's an internal-facing reflection where the team asks, how did we work together? What went wrong operationally? And how can we communicate better next time? Think of it this way. One evaluates the deliverable, and the other evaluates the team dynamics and operational weaknesses.
But here's the kicker. Before you can present anything at that sprint review, it absolutely must pass the ultimate test, the definition of done, or DoD. This is a formal, shared checklist of quality criteria. It ensures everyone agrees on what finished actually means. Has the code been reviewed? Is it documented? Is it tested? If a product increment doesn't meet every single criteria on that DoD checklist, it is simply not done. There are no more 99% finished excuses here. A sprint is only successful if the final increment passes this explicit definition.
Section 4. Crafting perfect user stories. Let's move to and see how this builds in to breaking down those massive backlog items into actionable work.
We know work sits in a backlog, but how exactly do we take a massive, ambiguous customer need and break it down into something a developer can actually execute in a 2-week sprint? The answer is the industry-standard 3C framework. Let's break this formula down step by step to show how we translate customer needs into technical work. First up is the card. This is the written format, and it strictly adheres to a formula. As a type of user, I want a feature so that a benefit is achieved. Simple, right? Second is the conversation. You see, the card isn't a rigid contract. It's an invitation for a dialogue between the developers and the product owner to really flesh out the details. Third, and perhaps most importantly, is confirmation. These are explicit, binary acceptance criteria. For example, the system must process the request in under 200 milliseconds. It's a yes or no. A story simply cannot be completed without meeting these strict checklist conditions.
Let's actually train our brains to look for this structure. I'm going to read this aloud. As a warehouse picker, I want optimized pick paths so I can reduce travel time. This is a completely perfect user story. Look at how it clearly identifies the user type, which is the warehouse picker, then the technical requirement, which is the optimized pick paths, and finally, the ultimate business value, which is reducing travel time. It perfectly bridges the gap between a real human need and the technical execution.
Section 5. Scrum in Action. Case study.
All right, let's ground all these concepts with a real-world example. Imagine a regional distribution company that is genuinely struggling. We're talking late deliveries, excess inventory, inefficient warehouse routing, and frontline staff relying on clunky manual workarounds. Traditional, large-scale technology projects have completely failed them in the past because of super long timelines and just awful adoption rates. So they decided to pivot to Scrum to solve these massive operational bottlenecks. Here is exactly how they executed that pivot. First, they broke down silos by forming a cross-functional team combining warehouse supervisors, IT staff, and data analysts. A senior operations leader stepped in as the authoritative product owner. They didn't try to fix everything at once. That's a recipe for disaster. Instead, they tackled high-value items in strict 2-week sprints. Those 15-minute daily stand-ups became absolutely critical for resolving immediate data quality blockers. And finally, iterative sprint reviews allowed them to capture immediate, honest feedback directly from the frontline staff on their pilot workflows.
And the results? They were absolutely remarkable. By using this agile iterative approach to deliver new capabilities, they achieved a massive 20% reduction in their order-to-ship time, all while simultaneously improving their forecast accuracy. That right there is the power of building exactly what frontline workers actually need, rather than what some disconnected manager guesses they need. A 20% reduction is a total game changer for a business like that.
Section 6. The Future, AI-Enhanced Agile. We've spent a lot of time talking about current operations and using Scrum to build tools. But what happens when artificial intelligence becomes a tool to optimize the Scrum framework itself? AI isn't just a product to build anymore. And this brilliantly illustrates that exact shift, moving from the manual friction of traditional Scrum to a frictionless predictive AI integration. Just look at the backlog in stories. Traditionally, product owners manually draft stories and try to guess all the edge cases. Now, AI can analyze user behavioral data to auto-draft those stories and even predict hidden technical dependencies. For sprint estimation, instead of relying on human intuition or planning poker, predictive analytics engines can analyze individual code churn patterns to accurately project a team's true capacity. In daily stand-ups, rather than verbally listing blockers, natural language processing bots scan server logs to automatically flag passive bottlenecks before the meeting even starts. And for retrospectives, instead of relying on subjective feelings and recency bias,
AI conducts sentiment analysis on team communication channels to pinpoint exactly where team friction or burnout actually occurred. It's wild.
So we've moved all the way from the fundamentals of the Agile mindset to these cutting-edge, predictive, AI-driven workflows. But looking at these advancements leaves us with one incredibly important question to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. If AI can predict our blockers, auto-draft our user stories, and objectively map our team sentiment, what becomes the true primary role of human intelligence in the next era of Agile? Think about it. Thank you so much for joining me today. Keep learning, keep adapting, and I'll see you next time.